Welcome to I'm Going In, the newest and hottest podcast sharing incredible stories of strength, resilience, and love. This podcast is about that moment when you face trauma or been knocked down and you decide, I'm going in. Whether it's to help yourself stand back up, to strengthen your faith, or to support others, this is where inspiration begins. Like and subscribe to my social channels and get ready to be uplifted as I introduce our next incredible guest on I'm Going In. Hey everybody, welcome back to I'm Going In. My name is Todd Blyleven and I'll be your host as we go in with Chris Fields, a retired 31 year and 7 months, almost 32 years, firefighter out of Oklahoma City. And Chris has been retired for just about 7 years now, doing God's work. He's getting out and just really spreading the love amongst his brothers and sisters in the first responder community, talking about their challenges that they deal with every day, especially some of those hard challenges that they have to encounter when others can't. And Chris is there as a support figure across the country and probably internationally. And probably where Chris, is known more on an international basis is in April of 1995. He was one of the first on scene, and I'm not going to tell this story. We'll let Chris tell the story, but one of the first on scene at the horrible incident where there was a bombing at the federal building in Oklahoma City, where 168 people lost their lives. And Chris, man, I know we're going to talk about that story. But this is all about the moment when you decided I'm going in. And I know as a first responder, I've had a lot on the show. A lot of my buddies are first responders. It's your job, but you also have the choice to go in and do your job, or you have that choice to go beyond what your job entails. And you represent that. And so I want to talk about that moment when you decided I'm going in, I'm going all in. And then the aftermath, after all that, dust settles and you go through all the things that you go through that trauma and tragedy, the moment you decided to go in for yourself and decide, man, I'm not going to let this beat me. I'm going to stand tall again, and I'm going to walk tall for myself, walk tall for my family. So thank you again for being on I'm Going In. I really appreciate it. We met through a mutual friend, and pretty awesome, and got a chance to see you up in Oklahoma City at the World Series in softball and shake hands. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about your background. I always ask first responders, like, why'd you become a first responder? What was that choice like? And talk to us about that moment leading up to that tragic time at the bombing.
Okay. First of all, Todd, man, appreciate you having me on. Welcome to all the listeners. And yeah, very nice meeting you. Like I said, a mutual friend, high school friend of mine, great person. I know y'all are friends, and
yeah.
Like I say, got to meet you in Oklahoma City, where the Sooners did win their fourth straight World Series title. Thought I'd throw that in there. Yeah. Anyway, becoming a first responder was, I don't say I wasn't one of those little, as a kid, cowboy, astronaut, fireman, it really wasn't. If you'd asked me that when I was a kid, I probably wouldn't even gave you an answer, because none of that stuff really interested me or at the time. But growing up, my best friend, preacher's kid, friend of mine, my best friend, his dad was the pastor of our church, of course, and he was also the chaplain for the Oklahoma City Fire Department. So when I would stay with him or hang with him on the weekends, whatever, I was around that culture quite a bit. And because he was the chaplain of the fire department, the church I grew up in, were a bunch of Oklahoma City firefighters went there. And I do remember, going to the fire stations with him sometimes, and then even at church, just the way people kind of revered them, and the way they were looked upon in the community and all that just kind of appealed to me. Still wasn't thinking as anything I really, wanted to do, but, got out of high school and did some college stuff, and that really wasn't for me. And I was just sitting there thinking one night, man, I got to find something. I got to do something. I was working for my dad, kind of in the oil field slash. He had a feed store and a auto parts store, stuff like that.
Wow.
And I don't know. I just thought, man, I've always loved the fire service, and so I tested for I actually tested for a smaller department outside of Oklahoma City, and I didn't get hired. They were only hiring 3 people, and man, I thought my world was done. That's really kind of the first thing I'd ever really failed at, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Growing up and playing little league sports, I was fortunate enough to be athletic, thanks to my mom and dad. But so I always had success at everything, and then I didn't get hired, and I thought, man, this is this is reality. Um, then I tested for Oklahoma City, and there was like 2,000 something applicants for 25
Wow.
positions, and
Oh, geez.
I was fortunate enough to get hired and start my career. I got hired 2 weeks before I turned 21, and the job really appealed to me. I remember, like saying, when I was a kid, watching those guys and how they were revered and all that.
Yeah.
And in 1985, when I was hired, and nobody becomes a first responder to get rich. That's pretty obvious. I think my first year on the fire department, and I know it was only 1985, I made like $12,001 my first year.
Hmm.
It was like seven something dollars an hour. And
Yeah.
but I loved every minute of it. Uh, sometimes people say I'd do it for free, and it was so fun. That's kind of the thought you had. You thought, man, I'd do this kind of stuff for free, run up down the road, lights and sirens, just cool, I guess, but the career, I always tell people the first, I guess, thing when I thought, okay, this is not it's what I envisioned, but the effect it would have on you. Um, and it's getting better now in the fire service. But when I was hired, it's all about being in the best physical shape you can be in, period. None of this was ever addressed.
Yeah.
And my very first call, very first day at the fire station, uh, like September 14th, 1985, uh, reported to duty. And of course, we're supposed to be there by 7. That's shift change. I was sitting out in the park, I don't like at 5 or 5:30. The officer that's going to be my officer gets there, and he tells me I'm sitting out in the parking lot. I don't know what to do. He tells me, come on in. He says, hey, we're going to put you on this rig when this officer gets here, but for now, jump on the squad with me. No more put my stuff on there. Lights click on. We're running on a full arrest.
Hmm.
And I'm 20 years old. I haven't lost any, I haven't been around, see morbid, but dead people, I don't
Right.
know. And here I am at 20 years old, first call, uh, doing CPR, and you're doing it
Wow.
right when you hear their sternum cracking and all that. That's when you're getting the good pressure, and you practice that, and you practice it on mannequins and all that. But I just remember that first call, and that was what it was. It was a DOA. We did CPR for 20 something minutes, load him up all the way to the hospital doing CPR, and I just thought, got back to the station, and I thought, wow, this is real, you know.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and at that time, like I said, never being exposed to that kind of stuff, actually touching and handling, a lifeless body was kind of a eye-opening experience for what lied ahead. And throughout my career, we've had I don't know where we want to go with this, but building up to April 19th, 95,
Yeah.
mental health was never much in the first responder world.
Right.
Um, I was raised, I say raised, that's what we talk. I was raised on the job by some tough old smoke eaters.
Hmm.
And it's not that they were callous or hard hearted, or they just knew the realities of letting calls bother you. So they'd always tell you, hey, we gotta move on. I used to have an officer, he would kind of say, like, I can't have you. I know we just made a 2-year-old full arrest, or, did CPR, and we didn't bring the 2-year-old back, but I can't have you thinking about that, because we may be in a house fire in 10 minutes and I need you focused on that. Or we may be
Yeah.
doing, cutting somebody out of a car wreck. And I need you So you just learn to push all that stuff away. And that's just what we did. That's what we did in the fire service. That's just the way it was.
Yeah.
Wasn't that we were tougher or that we were, stronger than anybody else. It's just a process we learned to do so we could do the job. And now saying
Chris,
we didn't, now amongst each other, we could
yeah.
do a little bit of my first really significant call on the job, other than that very first one. In 1989, we lost 3 firefighters on a house fire.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
a guy I went to rookie school with, um, another captain named Jimmy Ayers, and then a captain named Benny Zellner, who was pretty much the reason I love the fire department so much and kind of a
Wow.
mentor for me. He went to that church I talked about earlier,
Yeah.
uh, and he was involved with a lot of the youth activities there and all that kind of stuff. So I'd known Benny my entire life, and he was just that I don't know, that firefighter's firefighter. Just did the job 100%. Great person off the job. Just and we didn't. There's a difference in just kind of like dealing with stuff and processing stuff, and we didn't do that back then. We'd go to their funerals, and we'd cry, and we'd hug each other and cry it out a little bit, and we'd laugh and tell war stories
Mhm.
and use our dark humor, gallows humor, whatever you want to call it. Which I'll say in the first responder world, if any first responders listen, that's perfectly normal. It's just our way of coping,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
We've got to learn to find better coping mechanisms after that. But when we're around our buddies and our brothers and sisters, that's just the way we do it.
The survivor symbol means so much to me as a mass shooting survivor. I wear my survivor phoenix with pride, representing strength and resilience. It reminds us that even when we feel knocked down, we're not alone. Together, we can rise stronger. A portion of the profits will support other survivors needing help. Get yours today at toddblyleven.com. Yeah, that's one thing that I've noticed, just being a former athlete, right? You have this team environment, you spending all this time with the guys in the locker room and out and about and on the buses and stuff. You build this camaraderie up. But to your point, like to to share my mental anguish, my fears, my depressions, whatever that is, you don't. You don't
Right.
share that stuff. But the one thing I've noticed, and I never noticed this before until I had a conversation with Chief Bernie Meehan. He was one of the first on scene at the Sandy Hook shooting, and he had been, I think he's still active, but he's been on over 400 plus critical incidences and things like that. And he talked about that evolution of how mental health and the advocacy and the different people coming on scene and visiting with in the firehouses and stuff has really improved, which is amazing to see. But the one thing that he said was different between the firefighters and law enforcement, which law enforcement needs to get a lot better with, is when you all would go out on a call and you'd experience that, it was generally an experience as a team, right? Not so much as an individual experience like law enforcement gets or sometimes our military gets, but it was as a team. And then you come back and you process that in your own way. So you talk about like the dark humor piece. He would say that, sometimes like if they experienced a really bad call and knowing they were all going back to the firehouse, they would stop and get what they called like a traditional cake. And they would bring the cake back. And that was kind of like they'd all have a slice of cake and that was their moment. And when the cake was done and they were done eating, they'd get up and there it went. It went to the back of the brain. Right.
Right.
So, yeah, it's just interesting to hear you talk about how you as a team would process these
Right.
horrible incidences that we get upset on a normal basis if we get into a car accident or we, twist our ankle or something. And oh my gosh, did you see that person fall? So, talk to us a little bit about, how that evolution really started to kind of become better in your world. And then obviously how that became an integral part into what you went through in your tragic moment.
Right. Like I say, it was an evolution, and it was I think even when we had that house fire that killed 3 guys, they brought in some like a CISD or CISM team from another
Mhm.
state. And, it was new to us. Everybody was like, not real big on it. We still did our own thing. And then, and I say all that, we talk about, I talk about that significant incident. There's been several, we've lost some other
Yeah.
brothers on the job,
Yeah.
but it's that everyday trauma we experience. And we call it vicarious trauma, where we take on the other people's trauma that we're running on continuously. I always tell people, and you can't always have a debriefing after they save it for major incidents, but it's come so far now, and I'll back up here in a minute, that now even the little calls, you can kind of have your own little debriefing amongst your guys and girls at the station over dinner, which used to you didn't. That's where you'd use the dark humor and the all that to get by it. Now there's more open conversations, and I used
Yeah.
to tell people some of the all those significant calls, and suicides and shootings and car wrecks where you're cutting a 16-year-old out of the car when their parents show up on the scene, just all that stuff. And that you just take on their trauma. But I always tell people what we used to call like an everyday routine call would be like at shift change early in the morning, you make a check the welfare. It's usually an elderly person that's passed away in their sleep. You go into the house, and I can visually picture myself doing it right now. You're walking down the hall of the bedroom and you see their family pictures or their sports stuff or their war medals, if they're old veterans, and you go back there and there's nothing you can do. They're already deceased, and you come back out and you tell that spouse, that wife, yeah, he's gone. There's nothing we can do. And all of a sudden you have this lady crying on your shoulder that says, I've
Yeah.
been married to this. I woke up every morning with this man for 60 something years. What do I do? So you're taking care of them until the family gets, just things like that we
Wow.
used to not even talk about. That was nothing. That was just, if you couldn't handle that, you were in for a long career. That stuff
Yeah.
used to eat at me, because I would think about that little old lady or that little old man the rest of the day, thinking, what are they doing? What process are they doing right now? But it's came so far that, like I say, you can go backstage and talk about that little stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
yeah,
That's
like I
that's
say,
actually
it's
that's heroic, man. I mean, like you don't hear those stories. You think, you guys go into the house. I mean, I've had firefighters come into our house when I was younger. My little brother, drowned in the pool, and thankfully he was recessed. But
right,
man, that was the first taste. And I remember I've been around you guys with my dad playing baseball, and
right,
you were around first responders. My dad did a lot for the community and for the hospitals and the kids and stuff. But when it was serious, there was like pounding on the door, and the door opens, and here comes these firefighters running through the door, and they're like, you guys were locked in. And I mean, you look at that, you take care of that business part, but then the aftermath, the consoling of it, it's like an instant support figure. It's amazing. We don't think about what you all go through, and how you bring peace to such a tragic incident.
right. And like I
Awesome.
said,
Wow.
it's part of to me, it's part of the calling, the service that we
Yeah.
do. Can't just leave that, person there by themselves. And there's a lot of that goes on. And I say, we don't, and I don't bring it up to say, look what we do. I just say it's just a
Right.
part of that job that nobody, thinks about, because they don't see it in the public. They see the lights and the sirens and the water getting squirted on the fire, and they see that kind of stuff. And I always tell people that's on top of our personal life that
Yeah. Yeah.
may be in
Yeah.
shambles, or
Yeah.
and the stuff is
Yeah.
going, if you just lost a parent and now you're running on an elderly person that passed away, or you're running on somebody that just lost a parent when you just lost. So there's just so many nuances that come together. And I say people forget that. I think sometimes we forget that. We won't allow ourselves that grace, as first responders, to take care of ourselves, and and I've learned over the years, I can't take care of other people, my family and other people, if I'm not taking care of myself,
Yeah.
first of all. But I'll skip ahead. April 19th, 1995, the day of the bombing. Um, the aftermath of that was, I don't know. Do you want to talk about the photo and all that, or do we want to? just talk about
I
the.
want you to just listen. We're just talking. So I want you to talk about, I think like obviously, and we talked about this a little bit, before we started. What I've learned about my own personal growth and as I tell the story and get out and speak and
Mhm.
it's one thing to talk about like what I went through in Las Vegas during the mass shooting, and you're about to talk about what you went through in 1995. But it's the aftermath.
Right,
It's getting through what happened to you and how you were able to stay strong in those moments to help so many stay alive. And of course, there were those that didn't. And
right.
then how you process that. So I'd love for you to just, yeah, maybe paint the picture, for those that, what was that like coming on scene? And
Right.
then obviously your hair on fire, no pun intended, but you're
Right.
rushing in and take us through that moment, and talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay. Yeah.
I know that the picture was pretty iconic and how that
Right.
made
And
you
and that and
feel.
that kind of that's that I'll talk about briefly because it does kind of that was the repercussions of that was part of the aftermath and part of
Mhm.
the downward spiral and all that kind of good stuff or bad stuff. But yeah, Oklahoma City bombing, April 19th, 1995. I'll remember it was a Wednesday, sticks out in my head. Um, but yeah, we were at the station, kind of doing the daily routine, and we'd come on shift that morning, and my fire station that I was at the time was 15 blocks north of the Oklahoma City bombing of the federal building. So we get dispatched. We heard the explosion. We went outside and looked. It rattled the station and the windows. We
Wow.
saw a plume of smoke coming from downtown Oklahoma City, which, like I say, was just 15 blocks to the south. We knew we'd be dispatched just because we could tell large explosion. We could see the plume of black smoke, and so we self-dispatched ourselves. And we got down there, and uh, there was a daycare inside the federal building, but there was also a YMCA across the street, or YMCA, and had a daycare in it. Uh, I was one of three officers at our station that day. We had three different rigs. I was one officers on one of them, and they had set up a little triage over here for people coming out of that YMCA. They all had like flying debris injuries, glass
Mm.
cuts, and stuff like that. Nothing really major. Um, about that time, the commander of the incident told my unit, which I was on the hazardous materials unit that day, to come down to the bomb site to help and with the police getting some ladies out of the basement. We did that, and then we were going to another assignment, and I'll talk about the photo real quick. That's when a police officer named Sergeant John Avery just came out. I don't know where he came from, but he just said he had a critical infant, and there's a photo of him handing her to me because I just said, "Here, I'll take her or take them." And it was Baylee Almon. I checked her for any signs of life. I had to clear some concrete dust out of her throat. She had an open skull fracture, and I think her little leg was broke. And
Mm.
same thing, I didn't see any haven't seen any signs of life. So I looked up and saw an ambulance across the street. So I took her over there. Said the exact same thing Sergeant Avery said. I said, "I've got a critical infant," and the paramedic, the ambulance was already full. They had somebody on the floor, on the cot, on the bench,
Mm.
people laying on backboards all around. He said, "Well, hold on, let me get a blanket because we're not going to lay that baby on the ground." So I got to jump forward just a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't find out, and that's when this photo was taken, which I didn't find out till 11 o'clock that night. And that's a whole nother how I even found out about it. Somebody called. We'll have to do that on another show. But
Mm.
anyway, I didn't see the photo. I found out about 11 o'clock that night. I didn't see it for the first time until the next morning when it came out in the newspaper and all over the world. Uh, and I knew when I saw the photo, I knew exactly where I was standing and what I was thinking. And that's when I was waiting for that paramedic to get that blanket. And I was just looking at Baylee. She had just turned 1 year old the day before. And I knew she was
Wow.
close to my son's age. My oldest son, he was 2 at the time. And I just thought, man, somebody's world is getting ready be turned upside down today. Just looking at her and thinking, and like I say, that was only like 30 minutes into the incident. And, I'm having that thought, not realizing that thought was going to be replayed in some first responders' minds 167 more times around that incident over the next weeks and months.
Yeah.
And still not realizing the magnitude of what we were dealing with. So that's when I knew exactly what I was doing, what I was thinking when the photo was taken. And then after the paramedic took the baby, I went and caught up with my crew. We removed one lady that was pregnant. We got her out, talking to her, visiting her. Sheila Driver was her name, 28 years old, all right here. That was like maybe an hour into the incident when we got her out and got her out of the building. That was kind of our motivation to keep going, because we strive and thrive on making a bad situation better.
Yeah.
That's just what we do. That's what we pride ourselves on. And there wasn't a whole lot of that day for what we consider making a bad situation better. But, as we've talked to families and all that, just, finding their family members, getting them out and all that was, good for them. But Sheila kind of gave us that motivation to carry on, to keep looking, because we got sent back to the station at 11 o'clock that night. And
Wow.
Sheila, like I say, an hour into the incident, that was the last contact we had with any live person the rest of the day. Everything else was recovery.
Yeah.
We spent the rest of the day with search and rescue, with live scent dogs and cadaver dogs. And that's what the rest of the day was like. Then we found out the next morning that Sheila had passed away on the way to the hospital. So that was kind of a tough moment for the guys and girls I worked with and all that. But like I say, we spent the next, 2-3 weeks on rotating down there. Anytime you were at the station, your 24-hour shift, you spent 12 at the bomb site, then you go back to station for 12, or vice versa. And it was different dealing with that because it was something that we saw every day. And rightfully so, because it was covered on our local media and national for a while, but local more so, every single day. A lot of times after a call, we know the outcome or we don't. We may read about something in the paper, or we may hear about a victim that passed or survived, but we saw this every day. And so it was a little different aspect. But they by this time we had our own CISM team there in Oklahoma City. So I failed some of my guys and girls as a leader because they'd always make us go to debriefings when we left, when we went back to the station. And my attitude, because I was cool and tough, and that's how I was raised in the fire service, I would tell my crew, I would say, hey, we got to go over here and talk to these people before we can go back. And I would say, I'm not saying anything, but if y'all want to, go ahead. Well, what kind of message was I sending as a leader to these people, that were looking to me because I was their supervisor or their officer. And
Right.
And then it just kind of went downhill from there. It was we had one of the people that was on the CISM team kind of go back to their station and tell their guys and girls what somebody said and what somebody was experiencing, and that got out. So everybody just kind of shut down, a lot better now. I mean, it was in the infant stages, all that kind of stuff. And
I mean, this was in 1995
yeah,
when really, like, you didn't really talk about that stuff.
we didn't talk about that. I mean,
Nobody
the
did.
cell phones were like new. I mean,
Right.
that's how,
Right.
think about it.
Yeah.
That's how long ago it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's probably a certain trust amongst like your outfit anyways, with even though maybe somebody's struggling, you don't talk about it. You don't even
Right.
approach that person and let them, they're going to deal with it. Maybe your own toughness is going to inspire them to continue to stay tough. But in the meantime,
Yep.
you're probably going through your own shit. So it's like,
Yep. Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I talked about the photo, how it played a role, because the next day, when I get home the next morning, there's media already all over our front yard, national media, because my name had been released, which is, it's just part of the job. And I had to call several like chiefs on the fire department to get a hold of the police to run people off our yard. They were knocking on our neighbor's door trying to find out
Wow.
information. I mean, it was just and it was something. I mean, I'm 30 years old at the time. Grew up in Oklahoma City. I'm not exposed or know any of this kind of lifestyle. People
Yeah.
just and met Erin Almon, which is Baylee. Baylee was the baby, and her mom Erin met
Mm.
her. Became really good friends with her. Our families are still good friends today.
Wow.
Yeah, she's had 2 more children since then, and 2 of ours graduated at the same time from the University of Oklahoma. So I mean, it's just I kind of took on a big brother role. So I was doing all these interviews that she was doing because she would say, "Hey, would you do this?" And I would say, "You bet, I'm there for you." So I do that, and then in my little pea brain and this irrational guilt that I was carrying because I was like the last one that she knew to hold her baby. Because of that photo, which I had no control over, but because of that photo, she wasn't allowed to grieve privately at all. And then being singled out in such a, you know, team oriented job, career to be singled out. But I had amazing support from the guys and girls of the Oklahoma City Fire Department. So, but still, there's still that uncomfortable deal of being singled out, and
I
the
can
fire
totally,
chief.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I, I can, I can relate, and it's not the same circumstance, and not saying that I'm in your boots, but I can relate to that. You talk about the feeling when you first, I'm just going to recap a little bit on
Right.
this, but when you talked about the energy that you had to continue once you pulled Sheila out,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, you've got this, there might be more, so let's go.
Right.
I experienced that same feeling in Las Vegas, when you pull someone out and they're alive, and it's this energy that you can't even describe it. Like, no matter
Right.
what kind of pain or exhaustion you have, you just keep going, and that's now your job, is to just keep going to try to pull as many people out as you possibly can, and then you have that loss.
Right.
And you talked about that, and the moment when that last breath takes place, and you're holding it, and it's gone. And now that perseverance, or whatever that is, I rely on my faith a lot. I truly believe
Right.
I was not alone. I don't think you were alone in that
No.
moment. And you stand back up and you just keep going. But then the after the event's over, you start to now get all, like, I had instant, and I was on the Washington Post and on all these different
Right.
media outlets across the world. And so there's this instant piece where you're like, this isn't about me. Like, I just went in to do my job at that moment
Right.
because I felt I was called upon to do so, because I had working legs and arms, and I was strong, and I could lift people up and run. I did what I could. But then you start hearing the stories of people that you either helped get out, which some did not make it.
Right.
And then there's the ones where you hear the story of, hey, you grabbed my friend, we chased you out, you put her in the back of a pickup truck, we jumped in, we just wanted to say thank you for getting her out. And she was, they would describe the wound, and instantly I'm like, I remember, but oh my God, there's no way she lived. And then you find out she did. And
Right.
there's like this emotional, just upward. I still get it every
Right.
day. I think about something with that, and the media part of it, like you went through with Baylee's mom. There's this part of it where, like, it's almost therapeutic in a way,
Yes.
because you're talking about it, but then on the other side, it's kind of weird that you're talking about it, and you're being notarized for this, and you don't want the lights on you, you don't want the cameras on you, but yet, like, for me, I felt compelled to give praise to all those brave people that came back out of hiding, or that
Right.
went back in with me, or to talk about the perseverance and the love, and take away from that evil that caused that moment. So I'm going to
Right.
talk about what happened, but I'm going to try to keep it here so I can control the narrative. And yeah, I'm just,
And
everything you're saying, it's so relatable.
and
Yeah.
and that was a big part of it, trying to control the narrative a little bit. And I'll
Yeah.
and I'll
Mm,
briefly touch on that here in just a second.
yeah.
But I'm like you. I like to I don't ever do an interview or a talk, or that I don't talk about, you know, and I always tell this person, I don't ever claim, I haven't done more, seen more, experienced more than
Right.
any of y'all. I said, I did what anyone else would have done or was doing around that building.
Right.
Mine just happened to be caught on film, you know. And like I said, and the fire chief would call me and say, "Hey, Chris, so and so, NBC, I don't know, somebody wants to do an interview. Um, he would say, do you mind doing it?" And I would say, no, I don't mind. And he would say, well, if you, or no, he would say, do you mind doing it? Before I could even answer, he would say, well, if you don't want to do it, just tell me no, and I'll call them and I'll be the bad guy. And I'm going,
Hmm.
I don't want to be the bad guy. I don't want to, you know, I mean, that's just the way my mind was thinking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That makes sense.
and like I say, to control the narrative, because there was so much misinformation about there about, you know, there were some people saying that Baylee was actually alive when she was put in the ambulance, and you know that there was a heartbeat and more could have been done, and you know, so yeah, I felt that, you know, and Aaron, the mother, Aaron knew, but I felt like I needed to. It shouldn't all be on her, you know.
Right.
I took like I say, I took responsibility for that photo. And then there was, you know, there was one newspaper outlet that tried to start a story that me and Aaron were having an affair. The mother of the child in the photo and the firefighter, and we had to stop that.
Holy
They were
cow.
trying to take, yeah, they were trying to take pictures of my wife. And me and Aaron were doing an interview together at her grandparents' house. And meanwhile, at my house, some photographer was going around the house trying to take pictures of my wife sitting in the house alone. And then, because when we finished up that interview, that photographer or the guy said, Aaron, would you mind giving Chris a kiss on the cheek? And we were both like, no, we don't, you know, we don't do that. That's not who we are. Well, that was all going to be part of their little setup and run the story. Somebody on the inside let us know what was going on, and we got to put a stop to it. But
Wow.
yeah, you know, and then, and so, like you say, to control the narrative. And um, another real quick side story, just talk about it. 1987 or 88, Midland, Texas, baby Jessica in the
Hmm.
well. Remember that
Yeah,
story?
that's right. Yeah.
There's a tie-in, believe it or not. Uh, 4 days, the guy that was in that photo on People magazine with baby Jessica come out of the well, Robert O'Donnell, uh, was a Midland, I believe Midland, Texas firefighter. Anyway, 4 days after the Oklahoma City bombing, he had already, I don't know if he retired or lost a job. He struggled with the effects of the photo and the job, and
Hmm.
struggled with some meds, and I think he got released from his job. 4 days after the bombing, he walks into his ex-fire chief's office and puts that photo of me and Baylee on the desk and says, this guy has no idea how his life's getting ready to change. He drives across his family farm, leaves a note to his two sons that, I'm sorry to check out this way, but life sucks, and he blows his brains out.
Wow.
Well, by the time that story made its way back to Oklahoma City, it was the firefighter, and because he had on a red ball cap, but they said the firefighter in the red hat carrying the baby shot himself, blew his brains
Oh
out.
no.
So the story going around Oklahoma City was that I'd blown my brains out. They were, you know,
Wow.
news outlets trying to call my wife at work. So that, you know, it's just, that was just the craziness of that photo. It
Jeez.
it was insane. It was like nothing I would wish on my worst enemy. Um, but it was just an insane part of the aftermath. And with all that taken on, you know, all that going on, and you know, now you're still going to work, you know, not taking off any shifts.
Yeah.
Uh, so you're still
It's
going to
what you
work,
guys
and now,
do. Yeah.
right, and now you're making other calls. You're working your 12 hours at the site, and then you're going back to station and making heart attacks, car wrecks, shootings, you know, all the stuff we do. And it was taking a pretty good toll on me. But I'm always, and you can ask our mutual friend, I'm always kind of the crackpot, life of the party, want to be the funny guy, happy guy. That's just who I am. So that's the role I wanted to keep at the station, because I didn't want my bosses to think I couldn't handle my job. I didn't
Yeah.
want the people working underneath me to think I couldn't handle my job. So that's
Yeah.
just what I did. And man, I played that game for about 5 or 6 years. I mean,
Hmm.
just what I felt was like a midlife crisis, little mini bouts of depression, isolation, maybe I need a Corvette, maybe, that midlife crisis stuff, and, and then in 2002 or 2001, so 6 years, we were putting a pool in our backyard, and I was helping the guys bust out the concrete to extend our patio. And I was working a jackhammer, and it started to sprinkle. And a lot of people don't know it rained the night of the Oklahoma City bombing.
Oh wow.
So when it started to sprinkle, I caught a smell of wet concrete dust.
Ah,
And right then, I mean, it took me back to April 19th, 1995. I didn't like
yeah.
freak out, or I didn't have, I just, in my mind, but I
Yeah.
can pinpoint that as the day really when things really started to, the, the little mini bouts of depression became longer. The isolation, just kind of locking myself away from the guys and girls at the station. Um, but still being happy, I mean, they never knew that, because I kept on that same persona. My wife could tell, but she didn't know what to say or do. That's why I'm a huge advocate for spouses of first responders to be in on every mental health stuff that
Yeah.
their spouse does, so they know the signs and the symptoms, what to look for,
Yeah.
things to say, things not to say. There are, um, and I'll move ahead. I know we want to get through this, but it was
No, you're right. Just before you get going on that, like it's not just first responders, it's everybody. I think
right,
it's really important when you've experienced a traumatic event and you're going through your therapy, trying to learn how to walk tall again for yourself, trying to figure out how to reduce the kicking in the back of your skull, the nightmares, the stutter of speech,
yep,
the tingling you get, the feeling in the back of your throat that just creeps up on you. Like if you're with someone, you need that person to understand those signs, those
right,
triggers, and how that's making you feel. And it's not just your life that's changing, it's theirs too. Because like you said, the jackhammer, I can't pick up a wheelbarrow anymore for a reason that happened in that night. I walk by into Lowe's, I see it at Home Depot, I see it around. I don't even want to be around it.
right,
I hear the shots, I hear, some of that, like what happened with the assassination attempt. You hear that elevated
right,
position, you can tell, yes. Does that take you back to every? Of course it does. And you probably have those trigger moments all the time.
yep,
And you've learned though, like I talk about it, and this is like, just talking about what you just discussed, but you have this ball of trauma out in front of you now. And it's never going anywhere. It just
right,
doesn't. I think it reduces in size, but it never goes anywhere. And if you don't keep practicing how to live with that on a continual basis to keep yourself happy, that trauma starts to back up on you.
mhm,
And when that starts to back up on you, that's like kryptonite and it starts getting at you, right?
right.
And then when it gets back here, that's when you're in trouble. And I think that's where you're going right now, when that trauma got too far back on you and nobody really saw the signs and how to help you, right?
Right. And that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Because like I said, that not only that trigger like April 19th, 95, well, now I'm thinking about the career, the job, the buddies
Yeah.
I lost. And then while this is going on, you know, we lost another firefighter uh, on the job. And a good friend of mine, my wife and his wife worked together at the same school. And just we lost another one off duty, but it was during that midlife crisis that I felt like was going on. I needed to change in my life. A lot of people don't know. I took a chief's test on the job, and I was promoted to chief, which I only lasted a year, and I gave it back because it just wasn't for me. But I wanted to get
Yeah.
back to the rigs and back to the guys, girl. It was just, it was nothing. And the fire chief at the time, man, what a great man. Took care of me. Knew I was struggling, but anyway, that's like I say,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother story.
Wow.
But one of my assignments when I was a chief, one of the first assignments, I was helping with. I was kind of a backup PIO. The main PIO chief was off. He got a call, and it was off-duty firefighter killed in a car wreck. And it was a good friend of mine, him and his 12-year-old son where it killed a couple of meth heads, crossed center line, hit them head on. Baseball freak. This little kid was like 13, and like college coaches already knew who he was. I mean, that's the kind of kid he was.
Wow.
And so, you know, and all this was going on, but I'm still, you know, I've got to be Chris Fields. That's what people expect, you know. And the sad part about it, I was being Chris Fields that everybody expected when I was at work at the fire station. But when I came home, so basically what I'm saying, I was more worried about what the job and what the people of Oklahoma City Fire Department thought than I was about what my own family thought about me. That's where I was in my mental state. And it just, like I say, everything started to spiral more out of control as far as the depression, the isolation, the temper, the anger, and not knowing what to do with it, because I still hadn't reached out and talked to anybody. And
You
finally, my
hadn't gone
wife
to
said,
therapy. You didn't do
"No,
anything.
I haven't
Yeah.
done anything.
Try
No,
to
I
deal
can
with
handle
it
it.
all by yourself.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm Chris
Yeah.
Fields, Todd. I can handle it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
would have
That
told
was,
you.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I was telling people that were few people could see it, and that's what I would tell them. I'm good. I got this. We all
Yeah.
go through it, you know. And real quick, it's so funny now that when I talk to guys and girls from the Oklahoma City Fire Department, that some that are my age that are retired, what they were going through that nobody ever knew, or now when a young one will call, I'll get calls from a young firefighter saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with this." I said, "Hey, you ought to," and I have permission from these people. I say, "Hey, you ought to talk to so and so. He went through that same thing." And they go, "He
Yeah.
did? Had no idea." And I'm going, "Exactly." You know, that's,
Yeah. Yeah.
but so it came to a point to where my wife, I mean, our arguments, never any physical abuse, but the mental and the verbal abuse that I was spewing. And that's the forgotten people in all this, in the first responder world, and anybody that's going through it. You forget the family. They're the ones taking the brunt of everything, you know. Um, because on the outside world, we want to keep it like we're still good, we can function.
Right.
Behind the closed doors where we're, you know, being the ass or being whatever word we want to use. So the
Yeah.
family takes the brunt of it. Mine did. And I said things about my wife in front of my sons that no children should ever have to hear another spouse say about another. Um, so came to the point where my wife said, "You need to talk to somebody, get this figured out, or you need to get out." Well, I moved out because I was Chris Fields. I could handle it, you know. And if she couldn't handle it, well, that was more on her. That was my line of thinking. And
Yeah.
so I moved out. We were separated for 17 months. And that's, and a lot of people I know, I think, 17 months in a lifetime is really not, it's not even a year and a half.
Right.
But man, that's 17 months that I can never get back, you know. By this time, my sons are, uh, one's like 16 and the other one's 10 or 11. But, you know, because I wanted what I thought was best for me, I left a 16-year-old son at home to be the man of the house and take care of his mother and his little brother. Um, and I was so good at keeping it hidden that there's a lot of people, I'll tell you, at the fire station at work didn't even know we were separated, or, you know, or that's how good I was at going to
Keeping
work,
it private. Yeah.
keeping it private. Uh, Now by this time, I'm able to do that because of, you know, Xanax and all this stuff that I'm taking advantage of friends that can get it for me. You know, a doctor friend who's doing me a favor, trying to help me. Well, I start, you know, circumventing and taking advantage of that, and showing up at work, and sometimes in a condition I probably shouldn't have showed. Well, not probably, that I shouldn't have showed up in,
Yeah.
which, you know, I've had to, since then I've talked to my fire chief and apologized, even though he never knew. Um, so it just came to that point, and you know, an extramarital affair that was going on that I was just making public. I didn't care. I was, you know, humiliating my family and wife, and my parents at every turn. You know, there's my parents in
Yeah.
their 70s trying to defend their, at that time, 40-something-year-old son for the way he's acting, you know, like parents do. And it just came to a point, Todd, where I was just like, I know it's cliche, but I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean,
Yeah.
I was wore out living this double life and running up bills to, you know, so I could be the good guy. Yeah, I'm not at home, but I'm still paying all their bills. I'm still, you know, they're not struggling. I got to live this lifestyle I got, so I'm running up all these bills for myself. And it just came to a point. I thought, I don't think I ever really sat down and said, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. It's just one night I thought, you know what? If I take enough of these Xanax and drink enough of this Crown Royal, I've made enough accidental overdoses that, if
Mm,
I don't wake up, I don't wake up. And
wow.
Cheryl and my wife can, find her a good man that'd be a good husband, and the boy, be a good father for the boys, because um, there's, my priorities were just out of whack. I was more worried about what Chris Fields wanted. And so by the grace of God, I'm still here. I woke up the next morning, and I was just laying there in my apartment floor, and I thought, God, there is no way this is where I've got a great job. There's no way this is where I'm supposed to be, in my life. This isn't, and when I say it's not my purpose, I didn't mean what I get to do now, speaking and all that. To me, my purpose was to be a good father, good husband, and a good friend, which I was sucking at all three. So I called my wife, and she answered, and like, what do you want? And I was like,
Mm,
uh, yeah, she wasn't real. Our phone conversations weren't real friendly then. And she said, what do you want? I said, I want to come home. And she said, without, and I get emotional thinking about it, because I think about where I'd be. She didn't even hesitate. She just said, come on. And
wow.
yeah. So, and she'll tell people, she's
Man,
had
that gave me
friends.
chills.
Yeah. Well, she's had friends, through that, telling her, kick his ass to the curb, leave him, don't. And she
Yeah.
would tell them, that's not Chris Fields I'm dealing with. She said she could tell when she'd look in my eyes, it was just dark. She said, I just knew it wasn't Chris I was dealing with. And I think by that time, even when she said, come on, let's do it, the fact that our marriage is where it's at now is kind of a bonus. She was more worried about just getting me healthy so I could be a present father for my boys. Like she said,
Wow.
the marriage working out where we are now is just like kind of a bonus. But yeah, she was just like, I want you healthy for the boys. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, it's that's
Man.
been that's been 12 years ago now, 13 years ago now. Uh, when I finally, went to treatment in 2009, 10, um, and really had no inklings of doing this kind of speaking or anything. I met a guy down in Norman, Oklahoma. I went to hear him speak at this deal. He came up to me. I'd never met him. It was weird. I'd never met him. He like knew my story like inside and out. And then he even said, this is how your childhood was. This is what I was going, okay, this is weird. And he said, you need to be telling this story. You need to be telling your story. And so I took him up on an offer to go speak at a deal one time. And I waited till I was retired. I wasn't gonna like take off and all that. So
Yeah.
2017, I retired March 1st, 2017. And like July, I went out and spoke at a deal in Arizona. Uh, Jay Dobbins, the former ATF agent that infiltrated the Hells Angels.
Yeah.
He's been on a bunch of shows. Yeah, it
Mm,
was him. He flew me out there to Arizona. I spoke at an event he had, made some connections and networking there, and been going ever since, man. And
wow.
I tell people it's great now. It wasn't easy. Anybody that's struggling, going through trauma, first responder or not, the process, the healing process is not easy. I mean, if it was easy, everybody jump on board and do it right off the bat.
Hey, just
But
take a
it's a
pill and you're
process.
good.
It's a tough process. And
Yeah.
so it was, it wasn't easy. I went to treatment facility twice. So anyway, that's kind of, that's it in a podcast, nutshell.
Chris, man, that's, you you paint this picture of, hey, this is who this individual is, right? And you look at that image when you're holding that poor little girl, and you see the strength, you see the hurt, you see the sadness, you see the love, the compassion. You can feel it, and I think that's why that picture went so far around the world. Is unfortunately in that tragic moment, you could feel the grace that you had in that picture, that you were there to help. And that's all you've done for 31 years and seven
Yeah.
months as a firefighter, was help. You went in and into people's homes where they passed away peacefully, and you consoled their family, their loved ones. You've lost friends along the way. And the whole time you had this mindset of, I can do it myself. I can do it myself. And you can't. It never works out that way. You can't,
Never.
man. And at what point did you realize that it is actually tough to say, I need help? I am a tough bastard. I have checked off every tough box in the world on everything. There is nothing that I haven't done or seen or touched or felt. And there you are, you're laying on the floor, in the bottom of the floor.
Hmm.
You tried to do something to just end it, thinking that people were going to be okay without you. And there you are, and you stand back up and you make the toughest call of your entire life, and you just want to go home.
Yeah.
And that to me is the bravest thing that anybody could ever do. That's the exemplifies, I'm going in, I'm going home. Take
But,
care of me. Let's go. I got to fix myself, because you
yeah.
wanted to be the dad that you are. You wanted to be the husband that you are. You wanted to be the person that you are today. And there's this purpose for that, where people can learn and say, man, this guy went through a whole lot of crap, but look at him now. He's a
Yeah.
beacon of just communication. You're tying people together, and you're letting people know that you can be as tough as you want, but it's okay to say, I need some help.
And
Incredible.
I appreciate those words, and you hit the nail on the head. That's what I tell every first responder I work or speak to. I tell them, I say, our in our job, people call us heroes. We say that's what we do. I said, so that's fine, but I don't care how many house fires you fought, how many victims you've saved, what chances you take. The bravest thing you'll ever do is reach out for help. You know what?
That's
If you're
right.
one of those ones that has that resiliency that's built into you, and maybe you don't, I think we all have a little bit. We at least need somebody to talk to. I always
Right.
tell them that reach out and talk to somebody. It doesn't mean you're going to be diagnosed with anything. It doesn't mean you're going to be, have to go to a facility for treatment. It doesn't mean anything. Sometimes just talking to somebody. But I'm telling you, the point for me was living the way I was living, and I finally got to a point to where I didn't give a crap about what anybody else thought about me, because
Yeah.
that's what kept me pride and ego. I always tell people I came to that fork in the road, that proverbial fork in the road that
Hmm.
everybody hits at some point in life.
Yeah.
And man, I had family and friends and loved ones over here reaching out, trying to help. And over here I had pride and ego, and
Hmm.
I chose pride and ego. And until I let those go, it means I'm still proud. I still have an ego. I mean, I'm a male. Males have
Yeah.
egos, and that's just the way it is. But man, this is like I say, until I finally got to the point where I just didn't care what anybody else thought. And that's not in a rude way. I don't, it's not mean I live a life that I step on people's feelings and all that. But it just meant, as far as me reaching out for help, if they thought it was weak, so be it. Move on. I don't need you. I
Hey,
tell you what, you may think it's weak, but I'm gonna be here for you if you need me. And that's what I try to tell people.
I think it's amazing. And I concur with that 100%. I mean, I know I have found more strength on my inside when I'm going to, say, a firehouse. I mean, this happened in Little Elm, and all of a sudden there's a firefighter that's a vet, went through combat,
Mm-hmm.
experienced the traumatic event. Not about a week before, I had a chance to meet him, and we were shaking hands, and all of a sudden, here we are. There's five grown men, tough people sitting in this hallway, right? And they got all this memorabilia around and stuff. And you and I were talking about it before, and how firehouses have all the
Oh yeah.
memorabilia, coolest places to go and check out, by the way. But here this man is, I've never met him before, and he starts opening up about how that call made him feel.
Mhm.
And we share a relatable experience to death, unfortunately. And like Chief Bernie Meehan says, we're trauma buddies now.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of you're in this unfortunate kind of a place, this club. But we started talking, and there were two younger firefighters, and they're just looking, and then two experienced, the chief and their mental health guy. And they're just like, what is going on? Like, this is amazing. Are you kidding me? Like, we're all talking about tough crap,
Yeah.
but we're all tough people, so it's okay to talk about it. And we're sharing relatable experiences and feelings, and it makes you feel good at the end. And you walk a little taller, knowing, okay, I just got off 10 pounds of stuff I didn't want carrying in my backpack. So
Right.
you need to find those people that have somewhat of a relatable experience too. I think that's key. I went through
Oh yeah.
EMDR
Yeah, definitely.
therapy. EMDR therapy for me was a godsend. My church
Same.
digging deep into my faith. I know I am completely bonded at the hip to God and Jesus and all the angels,
Yeah.
man. I wake up knowing I'm there every day. It's my strength. And EMDR was an absolute, but I found a therapist that I could talk to, because I went through a couple, and I don't know
Right.
about you, but I went through a couple, and my first 8 seconds, if I could get past 8 seconds of
Yeah.
what I'm about to share, I couldn't. So finally I found someone. EMDR therapy was amazing. But what did
Yeah.
you go through
Well,
that, or
yeah, yeah. And I always tell, especially in the first responder world, you have to find what we call culturally competent, you
culture?
know,
Yeah, that's good.
culturally competent counselors,
Mm,
clinicians that are trained with dealing with first responders and all that
yeah, makes
stuff. And
sense.
the reason I say that is I know that like when they had I've heard stories of some departments where their EAP comes in and the counselors that aren't prepared for, you know, and now these counselors, they're going to counseling from the stuff they were hearing from first responders, you know.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was the same way. I went to a counselor that wasn't, the first one I went to wasn't culturally competent. Not his fault. I went to him, and well, it wasn't even like I knew what all the issues I had, childhood issues, you know, kind of a, I always call my bringing up functional dysfunctional. We were kind of we were half and half. Wasn't totally dysfunctional, wasn't totally functional. But and the first thing he said was, "Oh well, oh you were at the bombing. It's because of the bombing." I'm going, okay, you've known me for 30 seconds, and you're
Yeah,
going to tell me it's because of the bombing.
yeah.
So, and it wasn't, I didn't like storm out or anything. I just didn't go back to him. Um, and but got hooked up with my superhero clinician here,
Mm,
um, and we did EMDR, and like you said, it was you know, it was a lifesaver for me. And I tell, like, especially in first responder, I tell them, we got to take care of each other.
mm,
You got a story to share it, because you never know who else is going to relate to your story. May not be exactly the same. Just like us, our stories are different, but we've hit on some notes or phrases and things we've said. We're going, you said some things, I'm going exactly and same. And
yeah,
and no matter what, I tell people this: it don't matter what you do, um, family to me is what's going to be there at the end of the day. Whatever
yeah,
family is to you, it may not be a
yeah.
wife and children. It may not, it may be your mother and father, maybe your brother, but whatever, that's who's going to be there at the end of the day for you.
Mm,
Um, it doesn't matter if you're the best uh, podcaster, best Major League Baseball player, firefighter. When I retired after 31 years and 7 months and 16 days on March 1st,
mm.
on March 2nd, they promoted somebody and put them in my seat. And the
Yeah,
Oklahoma
that's
City
right.
Fire Department hadn't missed a beat. They haven't called
Yeah,
to ask me back. They haven't called to ask my opinion about anything.
yeah,
And it doesn't matter what job it is. And that's not bad. That's just
right.
world. That's just life.
Yeah,
And so I say, you can't get so wrapped up in being a firefighter that you pick that over your family,
that's right.
because when you're done with that career, who you got to share it with, you know? So
Yeah. And you have to be happy with yourself, and you have to learn more about yourself to be able to continue to kind of bow your chest, pin your shoulders back, and walk tall for yourself
right.
all the way
And
through
I,
and
and
through.
right.
Yeah.
And just because you're going through it, don't stop. It doesn't mean it's like I said, if I hadn't, it's kind of weird to say, do I wish I hadn't have gone through that? Yeah, kind of. But since I've been through all that and been at rock bottom, dude, I mean, uh, that's kind of my resiliency now. When I try not to say I have any bad days, but I still have some days that aren't as good as others. My biggest hill to climb right now is forgiving myself. I still struggle with that for the things I put my wife and family and kids
Yeah.
through. Um, but the way I deal with that not so good day now is gratitude, being thankful for where I'm at, what I've been through, what I was able to overcome with the help of my family and friends, and things like that. And if I need 30 minutes to just be alone and decompress, I'm not shy about telling my wife that now. Where used to, I didn't want her to think there was something,
Yeah.
because when I would when I
No,
would when I
that's
would not
key.
tell her and she could tell something's wrong and I'm not telling her anything, she thinks she's the problem
Yep.
when she wasn't, you know. So that communication is, like I say, it's huge now that I can say, I need 30 minutes to chill and decompress, and then we can go do whatever. Or, and she's got no problem with saying, get out of my room, get out of the room for a little bit. So it's just that communication that, that, 15 years ago wasn't there, because I didn't think I should be, letting my wife know that I'm weak and having a bad day.
Yeah, man. I mean, and like you just said, and I know we're going to wrap up here in a minute, but like that communication of letting people know that you're struggling in that given moment, because that trauma, whatever, regardless of what it is, it doesn't always have to revolve around that one major incident. It could be
Right.
other things that now, because you've learned more about your insides and how it makes you feel, all of a sudden I talk about it, that ball now is sitting on my shoulder. And I'm like, hold on, I got to go into, whether I'm in a crowded place, I got to go into a bathroom real quick where it's quiet, just decompress. I need to step outside. I'll just take a little walk, maybe
Right.
down at the stockyards. We're down there and it's all crowded and the bars are crazy. And I'm like, all right, I just need to take a walk for a minute. And then like everything calms down. I get that ball out in front of me
Yeah.
again, and then I can go back in and I'm having a good
Right.
time. But if
Right.
you don't recognize that stuff, um, yeah, that's where it gets south. So,
Yeah, and instead of
wow.
having that not so good a day and thinking,
Yeah.
I'll pop me a Xanax because everything will be better.
Yeah.
Instead, so yeah, I have just other mechanisms now,
That's right.
to to get through it. And like I say, so
Yeah.
I try by it's not like me and you both. I think you'd be first to tell people it doesn't mean it's 100% perfect all the time, you
No.
know, but
Yeah.
it's not gonna be
No.
100% bad all the time either. So
No, it doesn't. I mean, and when it starts to feel bad, call somebody, have a
I don't have my
conversation,
deal on.
man.
I got a deal. It's a hashtag buddy check. It's a friend of mine. That's his 5013C. It's called hashtag buddy check. Where little deal. It just reminds me to check in on my buds every now and then. Just a simple text. Hey, how you doing? And
I love that.
yeah, it's a
That's awesome.
yeah. I'll send you one. I've got some extras.
All right. Yeah.
Just a little metal bracelet that says hashtag buddy check on it.
I would love that. Yeah, I got my pals. I got my rocks that I've had
Yep.
to rely on. A lot of them are first responders. A couple are not.
Yep.
But that's amazing.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you for being on this show and just being vulnerable. I know when I met you, you're not the person that you described how you were going through your hard times. You're
Right.
so full of life. There's this strength about you. There's this confidence and this aura, this appreciation of life. And that's who went in all the time to help those people. And that's who you are over the last 12 years and helping yourself and your family. And
Right.
man, you could tell like you brag about your kids, you brag about your wife. So it's just really an honor to meet you and know you. And thank you for being on I'm Going In. I really
Oh,
appreciate it. Now tell us, how can, let's like, how can they book your speaking? I know I'm gonna put your webpage up on, but talk to us a little bit about you.
yeah, and first, let me thank you, man, for having me on, and for what
Sure.
you do, taking that trauma and that tragedy and that what you went through, and turn it into making something positive out of it. And you're just what I talked about. If you got a story to share, share it. Don't keep it to yourself. It may help somebody. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, they can contact me on. I'm do all the social media. I do Twitter. Uh, I gotta shut it off every now and then. It gets crazy, but Twitter and Instagram accounts. The best way to get hold of me for like to book me or something. I used to have my own website. I kind of let all that go, and I travel with some guys now, and we speak separately or together. But the website is www.traumabehindthebadge.us,
Yeah.
and these are some badasses with big hearts that I'm honored to be associated with. But there's a contact form on there, and you just hit that you want to speak to Chris Fields or Rawley, whoever's on our web page. You can see it all, and that's usually where I just do everything through there. Or I've had people reach out and DM me on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. So it's
All right.
yeah, it was too high. I used to have a web page, and I got the other people take care of that trauma behind the badge page so much easier than trying to keep
Yeah.
up with everything and keep a calendar on it and all that. So, but
Uh,
that's the best way to get hold of me, or they can reach out to you and you got my
yeah.
contact or whatever. So,
Yeah. No, we'll put that up there. And again, man, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your story of strength and adversity, resilience, and faith. Really appreciate it.
well, thank you, Todd. I appreciate the opportunity always.